Hello, fellow traders. 'Tis I, the Rumpled One, coming to you on Monday, December the 13th. The year's 2021. Let's talk trading. Keeping it simple. Bias. These videos are for educational purposes only. Your results may differ from mine. What am I talking about when I say bias? What I'm talking about is picking one direction, aka being a rat versus being a Yale student. Now, the thing about the bias is you can always find a reason to go long, and you can always find a reason to go short. You can do that by simply looking at different time frames and going with the candle color on that time frame. You can do that by if price closes above or below a certain point, that'll give you a bias. If it crosses a certain point, that'll give you a bias. So there's many things that can give you a bias. But I'm going to go through the charts and I'm going to let you, I'll tell you how I see the bias on each one of the charts, and maybe something will appeal to you and you can use that in your trading. As always, have your risk management in place. Make sure you don't lose any more than you're willing to lose on any one particular trade. So starting with the monthly chart, you can see we've got red. So the bias would be short. So I would be looking to trade short. And until the month turns green, I'd be looking to trade short if I'm looking at the monthly chart. And then we can go down to the weekly. Now the weekly's green. The weekly pivot's been hit. So, and I can't, let's see, did the gap fill? We had 68.1. Nope, the gap hasn't filled quite yet. The close was 68.9, so we're still just slightly below. So that's another reason why I would trade long if I was looking at the weekly. Now the daily chart shows me that it's above the open, so I would be trading long. It also crossed above last year's open, so that's another reason to trade long. Now, as you can see here, it got within the opening range for the month and then fell down through it. So at this line, I would be looking to go short. At this line, I'd be looking to go long. But then if price came back down, I'd look to go short, which is the opening, which is the monthly open. And then here, if it were to cross above, I'd be looking to go long again because it'd be breaking out of the opening range for the month. Now, just looking at this daily chart, you can see we've got two green days in a row, and we definitely gapped down. So once again, this gives me a long bias. So, but if it drops below the daily weekly open, since it's still Sunday or Monday, the Monday candle, I'd be looking to go short then. And that's switching biases, which you might say, well, that sounds like a Yale student. But if you pick one thing as a bias, just one, not a conglomerate, not confluence, not confirmation, but just pick one as a bias, then you trade with your bias. And you can see here, inside bar, it came inside that range of that inside bar and then turned around and reversed, and you'd be up 28 pips at the moment. So you can see here the blue and the gray show you inside bar, current inside bar opportunities in action. Okay, looking at the range, you can see the pound is only 47 pips. There's some pound news coming out in about 5 hours, a little under 5 hours. No, a little under 2 hours. It's 9 o'clock my time. It's coming out 12 o'clock New York time. So in about 2 hours, expect this range to expand. And my bias based on the news is short because I don't think anybody anywhere, if they tell the truth, is going to have good financial news. Now I could be wrong, but that's my belief at the moment. The daily weekly open, to me, very strong way to trade because that way you can take advantage of the high minus the open and the open minus low ranges. And actually, maybe I will shift this over to the M30 candle color. Just to see if it, what kind of trades were available there. So you see here, this was one where you might have been stopped out of. This one you could have grabbed a few pips. Once again, there's more pips to be had. Then again, you might want to wait for a close above or below to open to take that direction. That's up to you. Okay, red rats are feasting at the moment. 21 pips off the high, 27 pips off the low. That's interesting. The smart rat zone's actually a little bit below the 15 pip rat zone at the moment. Pivot trading plan near the pivot is short. Near R1, we didn't even get close to R1, the short. Missed pivots, another favorite trade. Trading toward the pivot and away from the open. As you can see, it took out the pivot today. Open minus the pivot point was 13.9 pips, so that was a nice trade. On the weekly, it was only 5 pips. And the monthly we haven't hit. It's a whopping 100 pips. Now, one of my favorite pivot fades or biases is the H4 pivot. So for example here, you notice this pivot is taken out, but it didn't get taken out till this H4. And you see this H4 took out that pivot, this H4 took out this pivot, and you see this pivot here, it took a while, but it needed to be taken out. And this pivot here, ditto, it needed a while and it finally got taken out. So how do I use that? Well, this candle close never hit the pivot, but then we had a gap down, so it took it out coming back up. But this one, you see, all this low, to me, I'm knowing this pivot needs to get taken out. And since this pivot had already been taken out, and I don't see any pivots down here, this would give me a bias long. But this is one of those trades where you're going to have to wait. And you might be taking small profits along the way, in and out, as price would be oscillating up and down. So for example, right here, you might have said, hey, there's a missed pivot here, there's a missed pivot here, it's got to get taken out. But you see this never went up, there's no wick, and then when it crossed below the previous H4 low, that was an indication to get out. Then on this particular candle, you can see what it did. It came down, took out the pivot, came up through this wick zone, then through this wick zone, and then it continued. So that's part of the look left. But so if you had that long bias, then you just have to play the price action that you see on the charts. Wick zone. We never entered the wick zone today so far. And as I mentioned earlier, I know there's a bunch of economic news coming out on the pound in almost 2 hours, and I don't see how it could be good. And I'm thinking there's some traders out there, the big boys, want to sucker people in the longs. They're going to keep showing their hand, or showing, hey, price looks like it's going to go up, sucker the people, then it's going to come tumbling down. I could be wrong, and it could shoot to the moon today, but I just don't see that happening. I just don't see how they can say, hey, there's some good economic news out there. I'm just not buying it. And just so you know, the pound is in the launch pad in the 40s. And looking at the simple price action screen, what's the bias? It's the H1 candle color at the line. And you can see here, it was red at the 60 and this has continued on down. We've got 19 pip range this hour so far, and we're only 15 minutes into it. And if you look at the chart, you can see here's a pretty big candle. I would say chances are price wants to come down here again. And then ultimately down to this candle, possibly all the way down to here, because you see these are big candles, bodies are huge, and price has not returned to those opens. But you can see on this huge one, price has returned to the open, and I'm looking for price to return to the open right here now. So just looking at the ranges, you can see a couple hours ago we had a nice 30. Most of the are under 20, which is usually these hours usually are at 20 or better. So once again, a muted day. And you're looking at the ATR zones. You can see what price has done on the hourly chart here, crisscrossing the open. We're heading back towards it at the moment, 5 pips above it. So, fellow traders, bias. Pick one, only one, and trade what you see according to that bias. And as always, employ your stop losses. So, fellow traders, remember, it's not what you trade, it's how you trade it. So go out there and drain the banks. This is the Rumpled One, over and out.